Welcome to Roll for Combat with Steve and Mark. How's that? Every week
There
we
you
try a
go.
different intro. I'm going to
Yeah.
be like Murphy Brown with the secretary, which absolutely no one got that reference. But, um, yes, every week we try something new. And I could not get us a guest. I was looking far and wide, which absolutely no one got. But yeah, we had some guests lined up, and then they canceled, and then
We
I
very nearly got an exciting new guest that we've never had before.
she'll come on again. She promised she'll come on. I also think this topic might have scared some people off, but I kind of wanted to get people who didn't exactly know anything about full 4E D&D and MCDM.
Although
And,
Derek would have been good because
Derek
of
would have been good.
his deep interest in the topic.
Well, he did a stream yesterday, and he had like 250 people because he play tested it too, and he had a 3.5 hour stream of him just talking
Running
about
it?
Yeah, running it and what he thought of MCDM.
Well,
Because-
I have read the adventure enough to run it, but we obviously don't have enough players to play it here unless you played all the characters.
No, I don't need to play right now. We can do that some other time. We'll just talk about it in general because I'm very fascinated because you're a professional game designer and I'm a pseudo professional game designer, and you read the whole thing from beginning to end.
You're a professional game publisher now at this point.
Fair enough. Fair enough.
That's got to be something.
That's got to be something. I think I could design. I've designed enough. I have enough other games at my credit. I've done video games.
That's true. You've got Mall Maniacs,
play-by-mail games, computer games. I think, and not only that, I when I play games, I sort of know what I'm doing. Which anyhow, but I am very curious to see what you think of it. From a game design point of view, because I have some very strong thoughts on this game.
Okay.
That we'll talk
I think
about
it'll be
later.
very interesting to hear our back and forth on it, though. Then, especially if there are things we agree on and things we disagree on, that's always grist for the discussion, Mel.
Oh my god!
But before we get to that, I don't even know what the mini topics are. So, Steven, what do we got before we get to the main topic?
Well, before we get to the main topic, do like and subscribe, because we need more people to find out all about Roll for Combat. But I tell you, I went to a convention this weekend, and I was there with Professor Dungeon Master, and as many people recognized me as recognized Professor Dungeon Master.
That's interesting. Usually you said Professor Dungeon Master is really, really recognizable at these cons.
Yeah, he was. But here's the best one, is I played a game. You ever played the Play-Doh game? There's a Play-Doh...
Play-Doh?
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting game. It's like Play-Doh Monsters or something. What you do is, I played it a few times. You get 2 cans of Play-Doh, and then you sculpt a monster. And then the GM goes around and figures out what your monster's abilities are based on the sculpt. And you have, there's like basic attacks, but it's very dependent on like what your monster looks like, because how fast they can move, what their attacks are. And also, if you have extra clay, you can make projectiles. And I haven't played this game in maybe 10, 15 years, but I made a monster that was it was a huge mouth and little eyes and a tail and feet. And if you don't make feet, then they can't move very well. Like, you literally have whatever your monster does is what it does. And so this monster was literally a huge mouth. And then I made the monster Bob the Monster, because... that's another secret. If you make a memorable name, and everyone remembered Bob the Monster, and there was 9 of us, and then we went around the table and we played, and you basically rolled D6, and then one of the things is they were throwing projectiles, but they were going inside my mouth because it was like so big, and the DM said, well, if you eat anything you eat heals you. And then the other people are like, hey, that's not fair, how come he can heal? It's like, I'm like, well, I made a monster with a big mouth, and I made part of its backstory. It wants to eat as much as it can and everything. And so my monster was the only one that can heal. And of the 9 people I killed...
Do you need to like eat things in order to power up your healing?
Yeah, well, I would have to I would either have to catch things in my mouth or hit a crit. And if I hit a crit, which is an 11 or 12 on a 2d6, then I would roll 1d6 and heal that amount.
There you go.
So
that's exactly the same as the crits in the MCDM RPG.
Yeah, there you go. And I killed 6 and well, one was mine. So there was 8 bad guys, adversaries. I killed 6 of them myself, and then there was all these kids next to me, and when you kill them, you smash it. And I let the kids smash it because I'm like, okay. And then it was just me versus one other, mano a mano. And the GM missed a few of my heals. So if we were like within 5 hit points of each other. So I think I could have won. But the point is that after the whole game, the people sitting next to me were like, oh my God, you're from Roll from Combat. Oh my God, we love Battles We Best. I was like, they didn't even know. They were sitting next to me for like 3.5 hours and they didn't even know they were sitting next to me. And then they were big fans. So it just shows you, it's like, that's the funny thing. It's like Superman with his glasses. You never know who you're sitting near.
No, I've had the same thing when being at Paizo. Like if my Paizo shirt was not on, people didn't really recognize who I was. So they didn't realize they were playing with. Even when it was on, some people didn't. They like it was the blue Paizo shirt, and people like didn't know. They're like, who is this person? Why is he even here? And one person maybe out of 6 would be like, wait a minute, I think he's one of the people who designed the game. And he's here with a marker because he's willing to sign our books. I was like, yes, that is what I was going to say.
Yeah, it was fun. And you know what I also got? I'm going to show some stuff. I have something to show some of the things I got. There was an Ollie's there. There's no Ollie's near me.
Ooh, but did they have lots of cool D&D stuff in the Ollie's?
Yes, they did. Look, I got, ta-da! I got this.
Oh.
And this. I got Bobby and Uni. And I got...
Oh, you got more.
I think there's only 3 they have. And all together, $20.
That's not bad.
Well, first it was like 30 something, but then it was an extra 33% off because of the holiday savings.
Nice.
And I joined the Ollie's Army because I didn't know that was such a thing. So now I'm a proud member of Ollie's. So yes, I got these, which is only funny because I went to Barnes and Noble and they had the exact same ones at full price as opposed to the Ollie's price of like.
Can you be deployed when you join the Ollie's Army for a discount, like in the episode of Futurama where Fry and Bender joined the military for a discount and then got deployed?
Sure, that could happen to me.
Uh-oh.
I hope not.
Well, hopefully not during an episode.
Well, you never know. The other thing that came in today is the Indigo Isles maps.
Nice.
Woo! Look, 2 of them, and they look great. These are the ones that are going out in the Kickstarter. So
I'm looking forward to it.
Yes, they're being printed up now, and then the final books were sent to me.
Sweet.
And they're going to be getting shipped very soon.
For World of Battle Zoo Indigo Isles?
Yes, for World of Battle Zoo. So that was my whole weekend. War was declared against.
No, war were declared, Maceman said, which shows that Maceman remembers the episode I was talking about where they were like, if we join now, we can just get the discount and we don't have to do anything. And he was like, yes, unless war were declared.
I remember that. And
then there was suddenly a klaxon or alarm. Like, what does that mean? War were declared.
It's like Starship Troopers. They did the same thing.
Yeah, no, it's obviously meant to be like a Starship Troopers parody with the balls instead of the bugs.
Oh, right. You're absolutely right. And then, by the way, my dog's here. I don't even know who let her in. Battle Zoo Mastery, Strange and Unusual. People are starting to get it. So I saw it out in the wild, and people are very, very excited. So, sorry it took so long. You want to hear a fun story? Did I tell you it got held up in customs and no one told me?
I heard that in a message you sent to everybody, but not from anything directly to you. My dad actually had read it first. It was like, I didn't realize your book got held up in customs. I was like, it did?
Yeah, it got held up.
He was like, yeah, it was in the email that Steven sent me about it.
It was such a nightmare. It got held up in customs, and then they said, by the way, if you don't take care of this in a day. It was Friday, and then they're like, you have to take care of this by Monday or Tuesday, or we're gonna throw all your stuff out. I'm like, what? And then I have to deal with China, and I'm like, great. So I had to wait all weekend. It was stressed out to have to get all the paperwork done, and then I rode China. I get up Monday morning. No one wrote me back, and I'm like, ugh. And then finally, I got it all straightened out. But yeah, that could have been really bad. Anyhow.
I'm really glad that did not happen.
Yeah, I'm really glad that the books weren't thrown out because that would have sucked.
That would have been awful.
That would have been awful. You would have you don't have to tell me, man. That never happened before. But so what are the maps printed on? They are cloth. They're cloth maps. Ta-da. And they're pretty big. They're like 14 by 8, 9, something like that. They're as big as you can get without start. It's after you go past 14 inches, it starts getting very tricky and expensive. So, and it's something to do with the way they manufacture them. But I had to go through many rounds of tests to get this to look just right, because it's actually hard.
Well, it's looking good. You showed me a test one before, and that one was okay, but this one looks a little bit better.
No, this one, yeah. I mean, you can see, look how sharp, like the compass.
Yeah.
Oops.
That's part of what I noticed is it's sharp and the color contrast is really good.
Yeah, it's really, it was a lot with the colors. So like I'd have to make the fonts like really big. You see there, you know, because the fonts like are super large, but when they print on the map, they're normal size.
Right, because it's a map.
You know what I mean. But
yeah, no, I totally understand.
But did you do anything fun this weekend except lose power?
Well, I mean, we only lost power yesterday. It was only for like a minute or something like that, and then it came back. But we were worried that we were going to lose it again, so we canceled the Arcade Mark stream.
All right.
And that was yesterday because there was a deluge of water and then 60-mile-an-hour winds. So that was fun, I guess. Not really. This weekend, no, mostly we were just staying around at home, relaxing a bit, and getting ready for this week. Okay. There's been a lot of stuff to do and a lot of small tasks, but I'm making it through those so I can get back to doing some of those Year of Monsters expansions, which are really, really exciting.
Yes. And by the way, Battles of Eldamon, 5e version pre-release it's
really close. It's coming out this week.
It's done, except we got to proof it now. But
yes,
otherwise
that's why it's really close. It just needs proof. It's not done until the proofreading pass is over. And I think that somebody saw something about italicizing that we can still do.
I don't like doing that. The only global he wants to italicize the names of the powers. I don't,
because in 5e, if anything is magical for any reason, you would italicize it. Whereas in PF2, you wouldn't if it's the name of an action instead of a spell, like a magical dragon breath action or something that would be capitalized instead of italicized.
That power progression stat block will be a nightmare, but I'll think about it.
Yeah, we can consider it.
That's also not the final layout. I'm gonna have to redo it.
That's also true.
So,
I mean, in my original power progression stat block, the level numbers are italicized because the word powers is bold, but you have it so they're both bold, which I think is more readable, but it does have two different sort of subcategories that are both bolded. One is like the overall top section, and the other is the subsections for the levels.
Okay.
But that's enough nerding out about bold and italics.
Yes, I think no one cares. So,
what other things do we have?
So I have some mini topics.
All right.
So the first mini topic is something that I covered on the show. Is that?
Is it the one about the AI art?
Yes. So WotC was caught using AI art, and the follow-up.
Well, this time it was one of their advertisers, right? Their marketing people, kind of like when one of their marketing people stole Paizo's Intellect Devourer art for a poster for the D&D movie, and WotC didn't know. They were not directly involved. They just hired the people in that poster, and like it sounds like that's what happened again this time.
Yeah, well, yes and no, except for the full story is that when people called WotC out that it was AI art, they said, no, it's not.
Oh, yes.
You're wrong.
Well, certainly.
And they started a fight with the fans.
To be fair, if you have a strong stance like that, you may want to be checking out on it. Although I want to be fair to the people who are at WotC in the art department, because it's possible that one of the layoffs in the art department was from someone who either would have been the person who was checking for that, or that everyone's having to do the jobs of more people with fewer people, and so therefore they didn't have as much time to check things coming in from external marketing partners or something like that.
The problem with this whole policy is that their original policy basically stated it was very carefully worded and said that, oh, we're going to make sure there's no AI art in our final products.
Right.
And,
Which this being marketing a copy is not technically a final product, I suppose.
Basically,
it's different than if it's on a card.
It was right. Basically, the way it worded is our products won't have AI, but they didn't say anything about marketing, images or things like that, or third-party vendors. And there was a follow-up that no one really did, but 2 days ago, WotC expanded their AI artwork policy for Magic the Gathering that now it has to include third-party vendors. So any creative assets from third-party vendors can no longer use AI either. And that's where it gets really tricky because
how do they know? Like, how do they know for sure? Obviously, this time it was pretty obvious.
It was very obvious. Yeah.
Sometimes it won't be so obvious, and that's a more expanded statement. With that statement, if that had been in place the whole time, it would have been a different story. For me, the fact that a third party, like that was not WotC used AI, was not like that big a deal until they started telling people that they were wrong. Right. Even though the people who were putting out were correct, like that was where it was like, they probably shouldn't have done that. Whereas now that they have the expanded statement, that's going to mean they need to police more carefully with a lot of their partners as well.
Yeah, but you know what? See, this is the thing. I did a video on this. I work in advertising. And in advertising, I'm dealing with Fortune 500 brands. And when we deal with Fortune 500 brands, we get what's called a brand book. Okay? And inside the book, and this thing could be 100 pages on just how to use their logo. And that's it. Because there's very specific rules on how you use company logos. And they know this, is that if you're Apple, if you're IBM, if you're, Microsoft, they have thousands of vendors creating content for them, and they can't police them all. So they basically have very long, very detailed instructions of how you use it, where you can put their logos, what fonts you can use, what colors you can use. And, these books are very well made. They give you all the files you need. This is pretty common. So I don't think it's really that hard. It's that they'll just have to, if they don't have this already, if they don't have a brand book, they're going to have to put one together. And inside the brand book will be like, can you use AI? And they'll say, yes, this is when you can, and this is when you can't. The same way it says, can you use this font? Can you use these colors? Can you do this with the logo? And it's all it's spelled out very carefully in these books. And we would read them and study them and make sure that all of our layouts have the exact detail. Like one client I had was that you couldn't use their logo to click on it to go back to the homepage, which was interesting. I'm like, that's actually pretty common. A lot of people have that. You click on the logo, like, no, that's not allowed. So we literally had to put a home button. It's like little things like that. I mean, I work with Girl Scouts of the USA. They had very specific rules on how to use their logo and what type of logos to use and when, because they'll sometimes have big logos, small logos, and so forth. The point is that this is just one more thing that a third-party vendor or advertising company who works with WotC is just going to have to adhere to, and that's it.
Right, and it'll probably be in their contract that it's on them. If they violate the brand guide, then there's some penalty for violating the brand guide.
Yeah, it's not that big a deal. It really isn't. That's what's so infuriating, is that they're like, oh, well, it was a vendor, it wasn't our fault, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, well, the buck stops here. You hired the vendor, and if you don't tell them specifically not to do something, they're probably going to go the way of least resistance. And in this case,
and the
it's
old
AI.
Policy didn't say that the third-party people had to not use AI. It only said that they weren't going to use, that WotC wasn't going to use it. So they needed to officially change the policy, because you're absolutely right. Otherwise, those third-party vendors are going to cheap out and do it as inexpensively for them as possible to get the money that WotC is paying them.
Right.
And still produce the result. Yeah,
because they usually do this as a flat fee. So, like, if you hire an ad agency to do campaign for you and you pay them, we'll just say 50 grand, they're getting that 50 grand and they have to do X amount of advertising, X amount of time using this style. Well, whether they hire an artist or use AI, that's up to the ad agency.
Yep.
and they're going to keep more money if they use AI.
Unless your contract says
Right.
that they have to do a certain thing.
Exactly. So now again, it's like this really is. That's what bothers me about this story so much. Is like I've been dealing with this my entire professional life. It's not that big a deal. It really isn't. There's lots of rules when you work with companies, lots, and this is just literally in 100-page brand book. This is 1 page, and that's it.
My guess is that based on their previous statement, that there were at least some executives somewhere at WotC who honestly didn't care if advertisers or other people who weren't their own products used it, or else they would have put out a stronger statement maybe. Whereas there were probably a lot of people at WotC who wanted to not use AI even in the advertisements, and that therefore that this backlash over this was a way to change the official statement and get that in the brand guide. And it was a victory for anyone who did not want AI in the advertising either, because it gives them a bad look, and they say, see, look, this gave us a black eye, it hurt our reputation, and that probably changed some hearts and minds or whatever certain executives and got things done.
Yeah, the thing is, no one's reporting on the follow-up. Like, I mean, I saw it, but everyone was talking about the first part, no one's talking about the second part, so I felt it was important that we say that, WotC is trying, and they're not the only ones, because Wacom, I don't know if you're familiar with this, Wacom tablets, they are tablets that artists use to, well, basically create artwork. Every artist I know has one, especially if they draw. It's just a tablet, it's a pen, you can draw on it. It's like, and they've been around forever. I mean, I think they've been around since the 80s. And they were caught using AI art. And this is to an artist community that uses your products to create art. So, oh boy, you should have seen, you thought the backlash was bad for WotC. You ain't seen nothing. They took it all down, but the artists went nuts because they're all anti-AI, or most of them. And it's like, wait, the company that literally makes our products is using AI in their products. Boy, did they piss off a lot of people. So this is not going away. I mean, you're going to be seeing this more and more. And yeah, you just really, the upper echelons and the people in charge of their brands have to just put it out there. What are you going to do with AI? Where can you use it? Where you can't use it? And what our policies are? And then probably let everyone know publicly, when and where AI is popular can be
Makes
used.
sense. If you want to see more, Steven has a whole video on this.
I got a whole video on it. I see you're answering the question to Amy Z, who wants to know what to get on the battlezoo.com website. By the way, you go to rollforcombat.com now too, and it goes to Battlezoo. I changed that. And
so I answered. I said, if you're a GM looking for GM content, Jewel of the Indigo Isles for adventures, it's a big mega adventure, or Battlezoo Bestiary for monsters and monster part crafting. Right. Meanwhile, a player or a GM who wants to add player options might check out Battlezoo Ancestry's Dragons, Year of Monsters, or Eldamon. If you want to explore the world of Battlezoo, especially to enrich a Jewel of the Indigo Isles campaign, then World of Battlezoo Indigo Isles. Plus, there's a bunch of free stuff on battlezoo.com. So one way you could start is filter for the free things, get all of those and look at them and see what kind of things you like. And there are usually a bunch more products like those free things. So for instance, there's a free dungeon ancestry, and then there's a bunch of other ancestries and an expansion to that in the Year of Monsters, or there's a free entire first chapter of the Jewel of the Indigo Isles adventure, and then you can get the Jewel of the Indigo Isles.
So speaking of that news, another interesting aspect of this is that after this all happened, artist Dave Raposa quit. And Dave Raposa is probably one of the most relevant, prolific artists in the TTRPG community. He's done things for Paizo, MTV, Riot Games, Marvel, Bethesda, Blizzard, Dark Horse. He was one of the most prominent Magic the Gathering artists around. He did a lot of work for this thing called Baldur's Gate 3. He's pretty popular. If you look him up here, I'll give you his site. He's one of the top artists out there. And check him out here. And he said, "Oh, I'm out of here." And he basically said, "I'm sick of this. You, uh, basically double speak, and you're saying, oh, we support artists, and yet you're using AI, and then you yell at the people and say that, how dare you say that this is AI when it's not, and then it was." And he's just like, yeah, and enough, and he quit, and he's no longer going to be contributing. That's a pretty big deal. I've been reading a lot in the Magic community that this guy has a lot of cards, and he's one of the top artists, not just in Magic, but in gaming in general. And a lot of people follow him, and it's very influential. And I don't know how many people are going to follow his lead, but it just shows you that, you do this too many times, you're going to start losing your top artists. So let me tell you, I have a couple of top artists, and if I lost one of them, I'd be hurting. And for a long, long time, I would not want to lose one of my top artists. So this was a pretty big deal. He's got a huge Patreon. So, and as I said in my video, and I'll say, the big problem with Magic and WotC is that they're known for art. And I know it sucks for them that they can't use AI art, and they probably really want to, but they can't. I mean, it's like, if they were selling lawnmowers, they could probably use AI art, but you know what? They're not. They're selling Magic cards, which is half game, half art, and they're selling role-playing games, which is art and text. This is like art is pretty much half their product. So
I do want to be fair in one way, which is that among other things that WotC's done, especially top executives at WotC that are problematic, the amount that WotC pays an artist for that piece of art that's on the Magic the Gathering card is pretty, if you consider that to be part of the same industry as role-playing games, which maybe you shouldn't because it's the collectible card game market, which is totally different. It's certainly more by a significant amount than you would get for drawing tabletop RPG art. So it is a pretty well-paying gig for art as far as some of these things go. However, that obviously doesn't excuse like mistreatment or anything else. And it certainly is completely reasonable for someone like Dave Raposa to kind of take that stance, especially after they were calling back at fans during that whole interaction. I feel like what happened there with that interaction was probably that after the time that something was incorrectly stated to be AI art, that whoever was making the interactions with the fans this time saw that this was something that people would come to the defense of the artist and WotC when it was not AI art, and so they probably wanted to get a news cycle like that again, but they wound up being wrong, which shows that on either of the two sides, whether you're wondering if something might be AI art or accusing it of being AI art, or whether you're saying, no, it definitely isn't. You need to be really sure. You need to get all the facts. You need to ask first whether you're the person responsible for WotC responding to the fans on this, or obviously if you're the person who's saying, hey, this might be AI art, try to get the facts if you can.
Yeah, I mean, he actually, I looked it up, he created 61 cards, so that's a lot of cards. So it's kind of a big deal. Anyhow, point is that it's just they really got to get their act together. It seems like every day there's another issue with them, and I don't know what's going on over there, but they really got to get their act together, because first they're losing the fans, but when you start losing your developers, you can't make the game anymore. You really got to be careful with that, as many other people have found out. We got a super chat from Jacob Buckland Seward, who said, "Thank you from Avenue Studios. Thank you for all that you cover, and thank you for your products." I believe I met Jacob at the convention this weekend, so I'm trying to look him up. But yes, thank you very much for the super chat. And yeah, we I don't know, we do what we do because it's fun. So one more, I got a couple pieces, but I'm going to talk about the big one. You ready for the big one?
Okay. What's the big one? Let's see.
Ben Riggs. the golden age of TTRPGs.
Oh yeah, that golden age of gaming.
We could have done a whole episode on that. It's already wet. So it came out last week, and we were kind of busy with other stuff. And I read through this thing, and a lot of people have said that this is, had a lot of strong opinions on this. And it's I'm gonna post the post, but we had him on our show. And for those who know what he is, he's a historian, the TTRPG D&D historian. He wrote a history of D&D, and
I thought it was a cool show, and he had a lot of really great access to some real early documents for his book that were really fascinating. Right.
It was. Now here's the issue with his article. First of all, what he was really talking about is he's talking about just 5th edition, and I think a lot of people miss that. Is that he's talking about how that D&D and 5th edition is TTRPGs. And if that dies, then this dies. And the golden age is 5th edition. So that's the first issue that I have is like, really? Like, that's it? That's the definition? That's the first problem with this article. The second issue is that and I can't believe this, is that someone who's a historian, he has a lot of facts just wrong in here. And I'm just like, it seems lazy. Or like, I don't know what happened. Like, why is your facts wrong? I'll give you a few examples. Like he basically says that, since the beginning of the 2010s is when like the golden age started. Well, first of all, and then he goes on to cite Critical Role and Stranger Things and so forth. Well, first of all, D&D 5th edition didn't even come out to 2014. Critical Role didn't start to 2015, and Stranger Things didn't start till 2016. But he's stating that this started at the beginning. So I'm like, okay, that's just, wrong, period. The other thing is he also states that 6th edition is not going to be as popular. And first of all, I don't know how many times we have to say it, and I'm actually believing them the more and more I talk about it and see, is that the new book is going to be very much like the remaster for Pathfinder, is that it should still work with 5e. And it'll probably be more like a 5.5 than a remaster, in my opinion. But from everything we've seen and everything they've been saying and everyone they're talking to, the game is still 5th edition. It's still 5th edition.
They've sort of said that the whole time. They were just going to go beyond editions at first, and then they kind of changed the marketing. They've changed the marketing spin on it a lot, but I don't think the designers have ever been unclear on what they were aiming for.
No, and it's not 6th edition. Like, even we joked that
you said that it was. You were like, but it is 6th edition. But like, nothing that they've ever stated has really changed what mechanically that they're going to do compared to what they said before.
Well, I think
the main question was whether they wanted to distance it and make it separate so that they could like purchase D&D Beyond and everything else. Right. But mechanistically, it's like a 0.5 iteration edition.
Yes, I think it's. They've doubled down, tripled down, especially after the OGL, where first it was kind of a little unknown if this was a new edition, but it seems like after all that they realized, we got to just keep this 5th edition, and we can't make a new 6th edition. This really just has to be an iteration.
But I think you're right, but I think that it was going to be an iteration mechanically either way. It was just all more about how they spun it, because they initially wanted to spin it as not being an edition at all, but being a new iteration that took it outside of editions and made an eternal Dungeons and Dragons that was just going to continue lasting indefinitely, but still mechanistically was more like a 5.5 in terms of like what they changed.
Yeah, and so the other thing he goes on, he says that Critical Role is no longer playing D&D anymore. Yeah, and they're playing Candela Obscura, which is not true at all.
Like they can do both. Well, we don't know for sure what they're going to do in terms of like Daggerheart and everything else.
Well, no, he's saying now they don't even play it. He's like, they don't play it.
Yes, we don't know for sure what they're going to do even in the future. So his statement is not only incorrect about now, but even in the future, we don't know for sure that they're going to switch everything over. Yeah. Like, probably they'll at least test bed it and see and make sure that bad happens and then try to do that, but we don't know for sure.
Mm-hmm. And he also has that. Well, now Matt Covell isn't going to be covering D&D anymore, and he's only going to be doing his, RPG. That's a loss of a lot of people. Tales of the Valiant, maybe that's going to happen. There's going to be less $1 million TTRPG Kickstarters. Of course, he came out with this right after we had another year of lots. I think it was just as many last year as there were prior years, or close to it. Attendance at major gaming conventions will plateau. Now, that one's most interesting of them all because I couldn't disagree more. Because first of all, Gen Con sold out. Gen Con is never sold out, ever. You couldn't even get a hotel room in the entire city of Indianapolis. I've been going to Gen Con forever. That's never happened. So, yeah, it might plateau because they literally can't hold any more people in the city of Indianapolis. Okay?
I was thinking the same thing when I saw that claim. I was like, not because it's not popular. And anyway, D&D is only one of many reasons people come to Gen Con.
Of course.
But just the plateau is going to be for logistical reasons.
And not only that, when I was a kid, there was like one gaming convention near me, and it was a comic book convention. It wasn't even gaming, it was comic books. And then there was Origins, and there was Gen Con and Comic Con in San Diego. That's it. Okay? If you take a look at the number of gaming conventions in the United States in the year 2024, there's a convention every single weekend. And not just a convention. We're talking about
more than
multiple conventions everywhere. Everywhere. Constantly. Okay? There was literally, there was Icon too when I was a kid. There was just not that many. And I went to a new one last week. I went to Page. That was the first time ever. Brand new convention. 1,000 people were there. That's it. It was fun. But they're already talking about the new one. I have a friend of mine who's doing a comic convention here in Westchester. And he just announced it. I mean, there's so many conventions. I mean, I can go to a convention every weekend for the rest of my life. And that's just in the United States. And you will never run out of conventions. And forget about the summer where there's like 20 conventions going on every single weekend. So I don't know what his idea of plateau is, but you're wrong. And the other thing that made it, he said, TTRPGs will be less interesting, less exciting, less creative. I don't even know where that one was just like, what is
that one makes
no sense.
Some of the claims that he's made, some of them are like, I see what this is connected to, right? Like the one about Critical Role, it's not true that they're not playing D&D anymore, but they did play Candela Obscura, okay? So like we can see where that comes from.
That was a separate stream.
Yeah, I know. We could see where the claim came from, though. Right. Where are you even getting that they're going to be less creative? Like, if anything, I can understand making the point that if the big dog breaks down, that makes it harder to do a funnel, just like the funnels in old school RPGs, where you bring in people playing the big game and then you funnel them out to other games later. I can see that argument, okay? Mm-hmm. That maybe it will slow down the growth of the number of total people who play tabletop RPGs. But where are you getting that games are going to be less creative because of the big dog losing market share? That just doesn't follow. It doesn't make any sense from that.
It doesn't make any sense. And it's just so weird. It's just a very strange... It's just all of his takes are all over the place. It's just like... there's not just like one bad take. There's just a whole many of them for all different reasons. Like some are factually wrong. Some are going against things that we've seen personally and can prove, like attendance at major gaming conventions. The frequency of multi-million-dollar TTRPG Kickstarters will decrease, maybe, but the amount that's being raised in total has been increasing every year. So I don't know if $1 million Kickstarter is the only method of measuring that. I would go by the total amount measured, not just $1 million Kickstarters.
Also, besides which, after the OGL crisis, the number of those big Kickstarters seems like it was like pretty high with people making new games. So if it goes down after it went up, is that really the beginning of a fall, or is it just that there was a temporary blip up and then you're recorrecting to normal?
Yeah, I mean, he basically is going on and saying that without Wizards of the Coast basically carrying water for the entire industry and having D&D come out, that the entire ecosystem of RPGs and TTRPGs will collapse. I think that's he's trying to say that. And he also says that he actually says right here, asking 2.1 million YouTube subscribers, will they go and buy the new version of 6th edition or new version of D&D? I'm gonna say this, and the answer is yes. Okay. And of all people who know this, who literally has the numbers at his side, the best-selling book for D&D is always the Player's Handbook. Okay, since the beginning of time, and
so you've come around to my point of view then from the old prognostications where I said no matter what, that the Player's Handbook, the core rule books are going to do great.
Oh, of course they're going to do great.
And the real question is what happens after that.
Well, yeah, whether or not people use it is the second issue, but it's going to sell. I mean, everyone's going to buy it. Okay, even if you say you're not going to buy it, a lot of people are going to buy it. And here's the thing. There's millions of people who play D&D. Millions. And we'll talk about the Matt Covell RPG in a second. 30,000 people backed it, which is very impressive.
That's extremely good, but it's not millions.
It's not millions. That's the thing. It's still a long way off from what D&D does.
And to be fair to the people at home, when you said, even if you say you're not going to buy it, you're going to buy it. I think some of our viewers are not going to buy it because of the fact that they're taking a stand and they're not going to buy.
Well, I was going to get to
the other issues.
Yes, but that's what I was getting at. It's like
statistically, like the people who do that, I say we, but like I probably might buy it too, right? I still get some certain amounts of things.
Of course,
just check out the game designer. Yeah. But even if it goes down to 90% of what it would have been, because 10% of the people who would have bought it don't buy it, it's still going to be an astronomically large number of books. It may hurt them because they projected for 100 and they got 90 and they lost a lot of their projections, but it's still going to sell so much better than any of the later books would sell if it's 90% of a core rule book. And so I think that it's going to be successful no matter what.
That's what I was going to say, is that let's just say the super hardcore people in our audience, and we'll say 100,000 people. 100,000 people are so angry that they're not going to buy and support anything from WotC, and they will not buy that book. And is that going to hurt them? Yeah, it's going to hurt them. But they're going to be selling millions of this book, millions. So you think, it's like, okay. It's
but
not
where
like...
it will really hurt them is those 100,000 who are really tied in were more likely to be among, maybe, let's say, I'm making up numbers here, right? But let's say 80,000 of those 100,000 were the kind of people who would have bought all the later books, or at least a high percentage of them. Some of those later numbers are lower, and so they're going to lose a lot more on the later books if they got a lot of the really hardcore fan base turned off. But that's only one of many effects, and there can be a lot of ripples. But even so, saying that the golden age is at an end is really making a lot of inferences that don't seem to be like, I don't know, like as a historian, aren't you going to be like talking about like what happened instead of just like kind of reading the tea leaves?
Well, that's the whole thing. It's like, I just don't understand. That's why I think this really latched onto the community, is that he's wrong in so many different ways. It's hard to actually pull this apart because he's just wrong. It's just weird. Anyhow, it was a fascinating take, and I would love to spend another hour, but we should probably get to the main topic. And
let's transition over with this super chat. Omega Rogue LP wonders if we're going to have Matt Colville on a stream in the future. I mean, I'd love to have him. His streams are really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I actually don't know Matt, or I don't know if I know anyone from MCDM, but I'll reach out and get them on the show. I'm sure if he's interested, because I'm a big fan of fourth edition D&D, and I'm a big fan of the stuff he's been doing. So I mean, I also backed it because, well, I back everything. I got to see what everyone else is doing. I mean, it's part of my job. I got to see what everyone's doing, and I want to follow along. So the big news, before we do that, do like and subscribe. Once again, look at that. We got 300 people watching and 71 likes. Come on, people. Don't you have thumbs? And, of course, do check out our new... Oh, that's the wrong link. I just put in the wrong link.
What is that? That's a link to the Golden Age of Gaming
That's the link to the Golden Age.
You can read Ian World's gathering of info with that link, which is not what Stephen was trying to link.
No, hold on. I'll get to what I was trying to link. What am I trying to link?
The backer kit, Stephen.
I'm trying to link the backer kit, but tell them what's in the backer kit while I find the link.
So, basically, and you may have heard about this in our previous stream, but we have a Year of Monsters book that was a series of monthly PDFs, and at popular demand, Stephen added in a hardcover option for some like very high tiers in the Kickstarter and a few pre-orders. That was going to be like a print exactly as many as were in the Kickstarter.
Print on demand.
But then as the numbers were going up enough, it got close enough that there could be a way to push for an actual print run. So there can be some in the store in case people want to buy it later. And so we're doing a backer kit to get that print run of the hardcover. And as part of that, we're going to be adding, if it succeeds, brand new content to everybody who has Year of Monsters, whether you bought it before or not. So I just like putting up more cool things for people, and this lets me do a director's cut of stuff I would have wanted to put in anyway. That's really awesome. So it's going to have, you'll be able to be like a slime, partial slime, versatile heritage, or like a fairy scion who is either descended from she, or maybe, ate too much of the fairy food
so like
and became forever changed.
Something?
What?
Nymph Queen? Was that one?
Yeah, Nymph Queen to become even more powerful, and like a demonic marauder.
It can be a mimic, it can be a doppelganger. We got a lot
There's
of cool
a lot
stuff.
of options that are going to be added for everybody if it makes it. So that's what Stephen is linking, and he has linked it now.
Yes, and that goes live in approximately 3, maybe 4 weeks, depending on a few things. And we are also hard at work on something pretty big. Oh boy. When you guys see this, I think everyone's going to freak out. It's going to be cool. It's going to be really cool. Let's just say every year I try to make the channel and the brand get a little bigger. And Mark knows what I'm talking about. And this is big. This is really big. Anyhow, let us go to the brand new news. So let me explain everything, Mark, then you can go through it. Let me give you my little spiel. So MCDM role-playing game, Matt Colville's role-playing game, basically, earned $4.6 million on backer kit. Now, very interesting the way he ran it, because let's break this down, because people think 4.6 million, pretty cool. Well, we'll say it actually probably raises about 4.5 million, because not everyone's going to go through, and you don't have everyone, there's a lot of cancellations and credit card errors, and then there's a 10% fee. So in the end, I'm going to say he really raised 4.1 million, which is still a lot, but that's what he probably really gets at the end. Then, on top of that, very smart, he got at the beginning of the year. Now, he will have to pay taxes on whatever's left over at the end of 2024. So at the end of 2024, if he has $2 million left over, he's going to have to pay tax on $2 million. If he has $3 million left over, he's going to have to pay tax on $3 million. So it is his best interest to do as much of this as possible now, and he will have a year, which will be fascinating to see how quickly he can get this done, because that money that he does not spend will go to taxes. And then for actually printing those books, he sold about 30,000 copies. He'll probably print close to 50,000. I don't know if any of those were digital, so I'm just going to say 50,000 say $3 a piece. I'll say about $300,000 on printing and shipping costs. So that leaves them about $3.8 million to play with to create this new RPG. And that's a lot. That's a lot of money. And he pays extremely well. But even if you're paying at the top-notch prices he is, that's it's millions of dollars of profit for him, which is quite impressive. However, if he doesn't sell it all, like whatever's left over, he's got to really get going, because it will absolutely suck if he still has $3 million left over and then he has to pay, $1.5 million in taxes, which is what will happen. So that's just an FYI. Anyhow, if you are in the Patreon, strange or not if you back it, you can download the pre-release of it right now and try it. And inside the pre-release is the rules, quick start rules, pre-made adventure, 5, I believe, pre-made characters, and you can just run a tiny combat and try it out for yourself. And his whole thing is that this is going to be cinematic RPG. It is going to be something where people are never really bored at the table, that fights, interestingly, always hit. There's never any missing, because he feels that missing is an annoying component of games, and people hate it when they miss, or if you've been playing for 2 or 3 hours and then you roll nothing but ones and you have a terrible time and you feel like you didn't really contribute. So I get his point. And what I wanted to do is take a look at the rules. Mark read them in detail. I've read through them, not as much as Mark. But more importantly is that the thing I took away from this is that this game feels very much like 4th edition D&D. Matt is a huge fan of 4th edition D&D, and I played a lot, and I mean a lot of 4th edition D&D. I played a campaign where I was a player. I was not a GM, a player from level 1 to all the way to 20. And I liked 4th edition a lot. I also liked it. But here's the thing about 4th edition, which is why I'm very curious to see if this can succeed. 4th edition D&D was amazing at combat. Everyone will say that, and it's true. It was a great tactical combat system. That was the highlight of it. The downside of 4th edition is that, first of all, it was so complex to build a character that they had an online tool, and you basically had to use it. You had to use the online tool to build your character. That was the first issue with it. And if you did it, your character was hopelessly broken. The second issue with it is that everyone kind of felt the same. And what I mean by that is that the fighters had special abilities, and then the magic users would have special abilities. And they would all pretty much do the same amount of damage, but it was typed different, or it was flavored different. And when you played it, especially after a long period of time, the only difference between classes felt like flavor. And that was a pretty, I think, important aspect that was lost in 4th edition, is that fighters were like, well, I swing and I miss, and I don't always hit, but when I do hit, I do a huge amount of damage. So that's like that's sort of the price to pay. While magic users, they would cast spells, and they would almost always hit, but they don't do quite as much damage. And sort of that's, the unwritten balance of the game, is that, fighters can go in and take a beating, and they can beat down, but they don't always hit. Magic users, they're very delicate, but they can attack from range, and they more often than not hit, but they don't always do as much damage, and they have to, the monsters might have to roll saves. Rogues were very tactical, and they could do a lot of damage, but you had to really be in the right place at the right time. And the problem with 4th edition is that everyone felt the same. Okay, magic users felt like thieves, and thieves felt like fighters, and fighters felt like magic users. Everyone felt like the same class, and it was just typed differently. And after playing,
I don't think I agree with that.
It did in the beginning. Now, keep in mind, and I heard that a lot. I completely think that's true, but
they were more similar than the classes were in other editions.
Yes, but
that is true.
And
because of
they
the
had
parallelism,
the same,
they were much more similar to each other. But I don't think they were. I think when people say that they're deploying hyperbole when they said they felt the same, because there were definitely significant differences between the
As
classes,
you
but they were
leveled,
pretty similar
here's the thing though, as you leveled up,
compared to before.
it did change. And they also completely rebalanced the game later. But at the lower levels, especially the lower levels, they all felt exactly the same. And most people don't play. I played the 20th level, and I was playing a warlock, I believe. And trust me, at the high levels, I was kicking ass. I had a million things I could do, and it was great. But at the low levels, where most people are playing, they really felt very similar, the classes. The other aspect of it is that it wasn't that great with role playing. Like, it was amazing in combat, and it felt pretty crappy in every other way, which is actually an issue with, I think, the Matt Colville RPG. And
I don't know if I agree with that either.
well, I will.
We'll get into that
We'll get
later.
into that. Well, it could be. I say it could be. And the final thing that was a problem with the game is that uh, there was so much errata, there was so much problems with the game, that it was a good RPG that should not have been Dungeons and Dragons, which is the most fascinating part about it. Like, if you played it and said, wow, this is a great tactical role-playing game, but it's not Dungeons and Dragons. So he probably took this and said, that is a good idea. Let's take a tactical role-playing game like 4th edition, remaster it, modernize it, and then call it our own thing and try again. And that's fascinating. That's why actually I wanted to talk about this, because I think 4E was really good at tactics, and it was a great game because I love tactics and I love fighting, but it was terrible Dungeons and Dragons game. But his could break it. His could actually do well. So let's see. I'm seeing some chats here.
Okay, so you've made your initial pitch,
Yeah.
but Steven, in your initial pitch, you said a number of things that I don't think are necessarily true. You said that all the classes are the same and feel exactly the same in 4E.
I felt they.
I don't think like, as someone who actually, my group decided not to play 4E because after a while we didn't like it as much. I still don't think that that's true. Now, I actually do agree that some of the out of combat stuff was not satisfying to our group because it felt like a more very light narrative system where it was just like roll the check and then narrate a large portion of stuff that one check did, as opposed to telling the story, rolling checks along the way at certain defined points, which is something more that my group wanted to do. But I don't know that the MCDM RPG actually is like 4E in that aspect. I think that the skills and other out of combat stuff is more similar to 5E.
The out of combat. But if you look at the character sheets and the monsters look like 4E. They literally look like 4E monsters.
So the interesting thing I found is that the monsters look like 4E characters.
Oh,
not 4E monsters. Sorry. Because 4E monsters usually had a recharge die roll.
You're completely right.
But
Sorry.
The monsters in MCDM have per encounter powers.
Yes. You're right.
Instead.
I apologize.
Which honestly, I think per encounter powers are better for monsters than the recharge roll anyway. Whereas the PCs do not have as many things that are per encounter. Instead, they have something in the MCDM RPG that makes them a little more distinctive. Although I felt that the 5 classes they showed us, 4 of them were kind of similar to each other, but they have a special heroic resource that they use to use special abilities in combat that could be very, very different from each other. And one of them, the stress mechanic for their psychic class, the talent, is very different from the other ones. But the other 4 are all pretty similar to each other. They're not the same, though. And the way that they differ can really adjust your play style. We can get into that later. I don't want to go deep dive into the classes, just in the middle of talking about what I may or may not agree with your thesis statement about 4E. But what I do agree with you is that this new RPG might be able to avoid some of the pitfalls that 4E ran into, one of which was being called Dungeons and Dragons, which this one does not have to deal with.
Oh, yeah. I felt this was... I mean, I remember when it came out, I was very excited, and I really enjoyed 4th edition. I loved the minions. I loved the different types of monsters that they had. The striker, and, the different, monsters had different roles in combat. It had a lot of incredibly good ideas, but what held it down is it was just a bad time for D&D in general. D&D was on the downturn. Also, a big issue was that there was so much errata, and they just kept changing the rules that it was hard for you to like get into the game. Like it just like, because if there's so much errata and they keep changing it, it's like you get into a group at like Gen Con and people are playing different games than you. Everyone's like playing different rules. And that was a big issue. But the concept of the at-will powers, the encounter powers, and the daily, to this day, I think was a very interesting concept. And I think you designed or co-designed Pathfinder 2nd Edition. So why don't you give an overview, maybe, since you read the rules? Don't go crazy, but give an overview of the game.
Wild on this.
But go overview what this and how this plays and how we didn't play it yet. Knights of Last Call did a thing where they played it.
I'm happy to run it, and it's not just one tiny encounter as you defined it before. It is a pretty substantial sized little dungeon that you can do multiple encounters in. Okay. So yeah. I'm happy to run it.
I didn't read it that
A
closely.
few people.
I didn't run it that. I might want to have you run it just to try it out.
Yeah, well, I can do it at any time if we can get the people to play it.
Okay.
So as they, it's good to see how an RPG defines itself, because while some RPGs and as like Jess and Lauren and I were talking about, like maybe the storyteller system slash the whole like Vampire the Masquerade style World of Darkness defines itself in a way that it isn't. But whether that's true or not, it's good to know what an RPG defines itself as. And this RPG, MCDM, defines itself as a tactical, heroic, cinematic fantasy role-playing game. And those 4 points they consider to be very important. In terms of tactical, that's like the 4E DNA. They want there to be lots of decisions that you're making moment to moment, that are on a grid, that are that allow you to deploy combinations and complex tactics to get an advantage. The heroic is that your characters are not just going around like torturing everybody and stealing stuff from random people and being like really villainous. And also means that you paper over like stuff like encumbrance they put into heroic. They also, one of the things they repeated the most times in this entire set of documents is that they aren't shadow dark and or that they don't track torches. Like, it was surprising how many times they said that they don't track torches. And I don't know why they think that people are so convinced that they would track torches after the first few times. But they also call out shadow dark by name in one of the times that they talk about the torches. And then cinematic is that it's supposed to be based on a movie or a TV show where you can picture in your mind what's going on. That involves like good names for abilities, like in all this confusion, which I always like naming abilities like that. In Pathfinder 2 as well, those were some of my favorite kinds of ability names. And then fantasy is that the genre is fantasy, although they said they're going to have like political intrigue part of the setting and like a multiverse part of the setting called the Timescape that they're going to expand on as well. So that's my brief overview of like what kind of game that they have said that the game is, to try to get you into the mindset with as little prior knowledge as possible for what this is, but assuming that you know certain other RPGs, perhaps, and I will vaguely describe it. Steven has already mentioned, and I agree, that there are certain aspects of it that kind of resemble 4th edition. And, you know, Matt is known to be a fan of 4th edition. So the creature roles, well, you know, some of them are in Pathfinder 2 as well. Some of them are in other games, but the creature roles and having like solos and elite creatures is similar to and minions with 1 hit point is similar to the way 4E does it. I think MCDM does it better with the way that the minions work, partially because attacks always hit. It makes it easier to deal with than a minion where it's a binary yes, no. because the answer is just yes, you definitely did kill a minion for sure. But they have a system of dealing with types of monsters that is like 4th edition, and the monsters themselves have encounter and at will powers. But I mean, there are a lot of games that have things like that. It has a lot in common with 5e. The ability scores are obviously D&D ones with renames, because I guess they were not as confident as Paizo or some others that they could just use the 6 with the exact same name. So they use slightly different names for all 6 of them, but they are the same, roughly the same 6 ability scores. The way that checks are rolled is actually honestly kind of similar to Apocalypse World, where it's 2d6 plus a number if you reach a certain target, which is kind of around the same on like some of the default easier checks as Apocalypse World, where it's Apocalypse World is a 6 or lower is something bad, and a 7 is a success, and a 10 is a total success. There's an easy check is somewhat similar to MCDM. A 7 is a success. An 11 may be a beneficial success where you get extra benefits, and then below a 7 is a failure. So they also have degrees of success here, where you can have the beneficial success may or may not happen at the GM's discretion. A failure can also be a harmful failure or something like that. I can't remember the exact right word for it. And that happens at any number value, which I found interesting. It's not just a certain amount below the failure. Just any failure might be harmful or not. The GM just kind of decides. Other than which dice you use, and though it does have like target numbers, there are saving throws, but they're called something else, where you like a resistance check. Use tests instead of checks for making an attempt to do something. And the way that you figure out what you're doing and what kind of test you're rolling is very similar to 5e, where it's based on one of the ability scores, which are not called that either. They are everything has different terminology, which makes it easier to say that it definitely is not using the D&D terminology. But you roll one of your attributes or abilities or whatever they are called, and then they might also involve a skill, which can give you an additional bonus. In this case, you're rolling an extra d4 for any kind of advantage you have. For each one, you roll a d4. And for each kind of disadvantage you have, you roll a d4 that goes against you. And they cancel each other out, so you'll never be rolling both kinds at the same time. But like if you have 3 advantages and 2 disadvantages, you would roll a total of 1 advantage, for example. Sometimes you roll a d8 impact die to do even more. And that's kind of how the die systems work, and and how it's determined what kind of die you roll. If you're using your skill that you trained in, then you have an advantage. So you get an extra d4 with that skill. And so those are kind of similar in some ways to other RPGs, but any RPG, you'll always be able to say it's got this, which is similar to this RPG, and that, which is similar to that RPG. That's just kind of how things go in the world of RPGs.
Yeah. I was going to say it was very similar to, if you look at the heroes. I'm looking at let me look at one of the heroes. It's very similar. They have a basic attack. They have might, agility, endurance, reason, intuition, presence, health. Okay. He has bloodied, which I always liked. I always liked bloodied, which is obviously from 4th edition. They have skills, which is acrobatics, athletics, charm, craft, deceive, empathy, intimidate, knowledge, notice, skullduggery, stealth, and vigor. You have your ancestry. It's very similar. I mean, it is not like, I don't know, like The Strange or something, where it's like just so different than your standard D20 system. If you looked at this, you would know, there's a couple of things in here you might not know, like victory benefits, like what's a victory benefit?
Okay, so
things like that.
Do you want me to say what it is, or you would just say that's example something you don't know?
I was just saying, like, there are some unique things to this game, like a victory benefit.
Yes. So one of the things that the game attempts to do is to define a tempo of the day that is not always just a downward facing tempo where when you start off the day, you're at your most powerful and you get weaker and weaker and weaker as the adventuring day goes along until eventually you limp back home because that's all you can do with the resources that you have left. Instead, in MCDM RPG, there's kind of a push and pull. You have what are essentially similar to 4E healing surges that you can use a certain number of time to recover yourself hit points. When those run out, you kind of have to stop for the day. Also, the talent class, and only the talent class of the 5 that they showed us, has a heroic resource. All the classes have a heroic resource. Theirs is called Strain, and throughout the day, they're straining themselves to use their powers. And roughly, your endurance, which is like the Constitution stat, your endurance, which will be 1, 2, or 3, tells how much strain you're allowed to take. When you use a power, you roll randomly and you either get 0, 1, or an amount equal to the power's level, which is 2 for the ones that are in here. Okay. And so if your endurance is 2 or 3, you can take that much plus an amount based on how many victories you've previously had in the day. And each victory reduces your strain. So if you use your strain perfectly, you have an amount equal to your endurance plus twice the number of victories that you've had. But that could get to a point where you're at your cap. And so you basically only get to use like 2 more in every fight. And so between that and the healing, you might run out. But other than that, the rest of your party is going to want to keep going until they run out of healing, because every victory makes your party more powerful. It eventually is converted to XP at the end of the day. A victory is winning a fight, getting around something without a fight, doing a very complicated trap or puzzle, anything that's considered a major victory. That is a very strong and cool thing in the system. I think in the example adventure, there's a few places that left me being like, it's odd that it's only a victory here and not there. Whereas I think someone could feel like they could be doing unheroic things because they're not given the victory. Like there's someone you can negotiate with, and if you fight them, you get a victory. And if you really, really, really negotiate well, you get a victory. But you can negotiate that, have them let you pass and not get a victory. That's kind of an in-between. In any case, these victories give you the ability to, once per encounter, generally do 2 things, one of which is add damage equal to your number of victories 1 time, but not for the healer. They heal more. And then do 1 other thing, like moving farther or pushing the enemy farther or something else that is equal to the number of victories. Then everybody except the talent also starts with a number of heroic resources for each fight equal to the number of victories. And that's very important because it means that they begin the fight more able to Nova, unlike in many other RPGs where you begin the fight less able to Nova, because even in 4E, where you have encounter powers, your daily powers might be gone. In many other systems, your spell slots or other things might be gone. In MCDM, if you've done 6 fights and you've managed to pull that off without running out of your healing, then you can use your most powerful abilities, at least in this playtest, from the word go. And not only that, but the barbarian-ish one, the Fury, has started with enough fury that they automatically are getting 2 pretty significant benefits from passively from the fury they have, with a 50% chance of a 3rd one. And so it actually encourages a longer adventuring day as long as you can do it, which is pretty cool. And you're right, Stephen, that is something that I haven't seen like exactly that formulation of it in a lot of other places. And I like the way whenever you give incentives and rewards in an RPG, you're telling people what you want them to do. And I like the way that this has a push and pull to convince people to try multiple things.
Yeah, I mean, so this is something I've talked about before, and I've never really seen it done very well in RPGs. In video games, they do it pretty well. But there's this concept that, okay, so most RPGs, you start off very powerful, and then as the day goes on, you get weaker and weaker, especially if you're a spellcaster. And what they're trying to do, which is pretty unique, is that you start off weak, and then you become more powerful as the day goes on, and until you're like a total badass by the end of the day. And that's pretty cool. I've played games that have done this. It's a lot easier to do in video games. When you have like kill streaks or something, where the more was it a Blood Rain does this really well, where it's encouraging you to keep going and it makes you more powerful. And basically encouraging you to take risks. I did play, of all things, the strangest thing, and I wish I knew what it was. I played a Lego tactical combat game like 25 years ago that some guy just made up, where you would build your character out of Lego, and you started off with, I forgot how it worked, but basically you started off with, say, 4 hit points, and then as you got blown up, you take off a piece of your Lego, then you go down to 3, 2, and 1. But what made it so fascinating is that you got more powerful and stronger as pieces of you fell off. And by the end, we all had only 2 or 1 hit point left. There wasn't like the one person who was tanking and just taking over. And it really was balanced. And I've also saw that in DCC 50. I've talked about there's a boss fight where the guy it's an iron golem and it's 3 suits. He's actually in 3 suits. And the first suit is really powerful and strong, but slow. And then once that suit gets destroyed, then he becomes the second suit, which is like average at everything. And then the last suit, which is super fast and agile with a very high AC and hard to hit. So it actually does increase. And in our own RPG, you know how I do this. I like to do stages and fights, especially against bosses, where the stages continuously escalate and get harder and harder, and the boss changes up their tactics. It's very easy to do with a boss, and it's very easy to do with monsters and NPCs. Obviously, for PCs, it's a whole different thing. Now, everything we've talked about, I would say, and there's no disrespect to this RPG, I think everything in here is pretty, I wouldn't quite say derivative, but I'd say I've seen it before. You know, it's a lot of it is I've seen before.
That's true for any tabletop RPG.
Completely true. But
pretty much.
Yes.
Because there's been so many under the sun that you're going to be able to claim that anything is a Frankenstein of 12 RPGs that you name, right? Like, I didn't get to the initiative system for combat yet, but we could say that's similar to Fabula, Ultima, or Lancer, because you alternate back and forth.
Yeah.
But in reality, there's only so many different ways you could do things in a
completely
RPG.
Agree. But this victory points where he's trying to actually make characters do more and be cooler is very interesting. And that the only thing is that as a game designer, how do you not gamify that and make it break the game? A perfect example, I was listening to someone today saying that you have to be very careful as a GM, because imagine someone jumps on a table and then they say, hey, you GM, Mark, can I get a bonus or something because I jumped on the table? And you just offhandedly, because you just want to be fun and, you know, have fun in the game, you say, sure, you get a +2 to hit because you're on higher ground. Well, guess what? Those GMs are going to be carrying around a table with them wherever they go in their bag of holding, and the fight's going to start, and they're going to like empty out the bag and fill the room with tables.
No, they covered this. They covered this twice. They cover both specifically what you just said and gamifying the victories.
Right, so, but my point is that
the way they cover the first thing is that they suggest, which by the way, like they have covered it. I don't really always like this style myself for my opponent games, but it works great for many games, which is they suggest allow it to work the first time, but never again. For they have that under a list of like what kind of things could you do for free.
Yes.
It'd be like you have to pay for it the next time or something like that, as a like a maneuver to gain an advantage or something like that, which I don't know. My group would prefer it to either work or it doesn't, but it is true that when you're trying to be very cinematic in cinematic things, sometimes you do the thing once and then you forget about it and don't do it again. So it is an answer and it works great for most groups, I think. And specifically when you're talking about the victories, there is a sidebar about Bag of Rats that is like the GM decides, or they're called the director also in here, but they decides when it is a real victory. You can't get it from the Bag of Rats. It has to be significant opponents, and it's completely up to their discretion.
Yeah.
So you cannot really game it. If it's something that's obviously not threatening, then you're not going to get it. And remember, nobody's attacks miss. which means that you are going to have to use healing resources eventually. Like, you're not going to come out of that fight and be like, well, I didn't need to be healed at all because nobody took damage, because the enemies definitely are going to deal damage. Just about the only way you could come out of the fight without damage is if your entire party uses stealth, because that one, the enemy might not know what square you're in. And if they don't, then they have a kind of a suggested AI to target the square you were in before, which if you have a way to sneak off on your turn, which the current characters don't, could make it so that you're never hit again if you always succeed at the stealth check. That needs something really weird like that, right? Not a typical gameplay that anybody would be playing. So you're going to take damage. You're eventually going to have to stop.
Yeah. But my point,
could you rack up like 15 victories if you somehow managed to do ones that were just hard enough and you use really good tactics? Maybe, but I doubt it.
Yeah, my point was just that one of the advantages, at least what I like about Pathfinder 2nd Edition, is that, I mean, I played so much of it. It's that there's just not a lot of really gray areas. And as an experienced GM and someone who has some of my players are literally lawyers, and they've been playing since the 70s. We know every trick in the book, and they know every trick in the book. Like, they are going to gamify, and they're going to find every edge case. They're going to find the edges of the edge cases. And I feel like victory benefits are there's just trouble waiting to happen unless it's really well defined and explained. By the way, we had a super chat from Baron Durop, who he wanted to come on, but he couldn't because he has to work. And his very strong opinion that he and I were chatting about beforehand was that MCDM TTRPG will be a dust collector because it fills a niche that's already saturated and is too crunchy for players to justify switching systems for. Pathfinder was the exception, not the rule.
I disagree with Baron about that because I think that MCDM has enough very loyal fans that it's always going to have a certain level of success.
I believe
as long as they deliver a good game, which I think that they are doing.
And they continuously deliver support for the game.
Yeah,
that's very important.
I think they'll be able to. But
yes.
Steven, I would say I just don't think victories are going to be where the edge cases are. Now, have I found edge cases when I read through this game? I've found them. It is a super pre-play test. It's going to have them.
Yeah, of course.
Like the taunted condition, the way that mounted combat works is so incredibly advantageous for the people who are mounted in combat that you should always be mounted on another character's. Everyone's going to be playing
piggyback. That's like
yes, as many times as possible because it allows the person who is being mounted on to move double speed, especially if you're both ranged characters who want to keep away from melee.
I know.
And if you combine that with a taunt effect, you could potentially have the mounted character taunt an enemy and then keep moving away from them to where they're still in line of effect but can't reach them. And then the other allies just kind of stay just out of reach of the enemy and the enemy is unable to act. There are weird things like that. They're going to fix those. This is an early play test. I don't think the victory is where the edge cases are going to be because naturally, anytime you have a fight, you're going to take damage and all healing in the game uses up your healing resource. There isn't a way to just get infinite healing until they release something like that, which I think they're just going to have in their design guide not to do. There's always going to be a push and pull eventually. Now, yeah, some groups might be able to get through twice as many, and they'll become so strong with all of those victories that they'll win much more easily in the encounters as it goes along and start rolling like a snowball. But they're still going to take some damage, and that snowball will eventually have to stop.
I mean, also, it's fascinating the way they use things like cover. Because, okay, if everyone always hits, then everyone's always doing damage. Then I'm like, really? If I'm in another room in the closet,
if you don't have line of effect, they can't target you. Steve.
Okay, fair enough.
It's already in the game.
Okay, well, they can say if you're playing against my guys, go, hey man, there's a crack in that door. That's enough. I can just slide my sword in there and get you.
If you can't have line of effect, then you can't target you. And secondly, you also don't hit if you don't know what square they're in and you pick the wrong square. There's two ways to not get hit. The third one is being out of range.
I know, but there is a thing cover where.
So those are all very powerful in MCDM because otherwise you are going to take damage.
But
that's absolutely true.
You do have Banes.
Cover reduces the damage that you take by 2d4.
Right. That was going to
So
say.
you will take 2d4 less damage if you are behind cover. It's actually damage reduction.
I was going to say is that you can hit and do 0 damage.
Yeah,
that's how they do it. No, it's fascinating.
If you do, they even have they know that's going to happen, and there's some very strong reactions that have the damage and reduce it that can get you there. They have a rule that says if there's an extra effect, like being frightened or weakened by the attack, and the attack is reduced to 0 damage, then it's automatically you automatically resist the secondary.
The only reason I was pointing that out is that was one of the first things I was thinking is that, like, is it possible that you actually can do 0 damage? And the answer is yes, actually you can do 0 damage. And it's actually it doesn't even seem that uncommon. Is that if you there's enough negative conditions, because you're rolling basically positive dice, and then the negative conditions, you're rolling negative damage dice. And if you roll more negative than positive, you don't do any damage, and that's it. So that I found pretty interesting. But the whole point of why we're saying this is that can you make the combat really interesting, really cool, and do everything else? Like, they have this whole system for negotiation, and I felt like I always felt it weird when everything is gamified. Like Pathfinder has that library system, the research system, where you have to like research and get certain amount of points. And we were trying that. I forgot which adventure there was one of the I forgot which adventure had it. I was running that one, and they had a lot of research in that adventure. The whole adventure.
Then you were running Malevolence.
Malevolence, yes, correct. I couldn't remember the name. Malevolence has so much research, and let me tell you, halfway through, boy, did it get boring. It was very interesting at first. It was like Starship Combat in Starfinder. The first time we did it, I loved it. The second time I did it, it was fun. The third time I did it, it was like, eh. And by the fourth time, I was like, enough. I've had it. I don't need to do this anymore. And I still had to do another 10 times. And
I do have to say, with those subsystems,
yeah,
it's about how often you use them. They sometimes are, sometimes snack.
Right. And that's the thing, is that I don't know, will they be able to have their cake and eat it too? Because I have yet to see a game that does, except for Pathfinder, that really does both well. It's like I've seen very good games that are very good at combat, but not great at everything else. And I've seen games that are really good at everything else, but not great at combat. And I just, and more importantly, do they care? Because they're making it a cinematic, there seems like everybody's going into combat. Everything's going into fighting. So does that mean it's just going to be like, well, yeah, there's stuff here to support role-playing and systems like negotiation or lockpicking or research and so forth, but you don't have to do that. Just figure it out on your own. But here's the crunchy combat. It's almost like taking Warhammer 40K and saying, okay, just use the 40K. It's like, but then you want to role play? Just figure it out. You don't need to do it.
I don't really agree with you.
I'm not saying no. I'm not saying they're doing that.
I don't think that's what they're doing.
No. I said they're not doing that. But should they do that? Is what I'm getting at.
You're saying should they limit it?
Yeah.
That they don't need to, because that's not what they're aiming for. Like, they've got a base system for the out of combat stuff that is definitely at least as good as 5e at doing that stuff. In fact, arguably, it is very similar to a setup of how 5e decides whether you're going to do a thing or not, with a different dice mechanism, a very, very different dice mechanism for it. In terms of the negotiation system, I will briefly explain to the viewers, because it is probably the newest, most different thing that is in here. It's a system to determine whether or not somebody who the GM has determined might help you or do something that you want. They have an interest in doing so, but they also have a reason not to do it. So you don't roll this if they definitely are going to, or they definitely wouldn't. And that's at the GM's call. And essentially, the idea here is that you are trying to find their sort of secret motivations to raise their interest up higher so that they will go from a starting point, which maybe I know, or a no, but I'll do this lesser thing for you, all the way up to a yes, but you have to help me, or a yes, I'll do what you said, or a yes, and I'll do more than you asked for. Meanwhile, you're also potentially rolling checks if you couldn't figure out their motivations, and you're losing you're losing time and their patience every time that you try something that is not directly the bingo of their motivation, and every time you hit one of their pitfalls that are something that is like a trauma for them or something that they really don't like. And so that is the way that the system works. I think it's very interesting, and it has a lot of sort of clever push and pull mechanics. I'd say that the only thing that I currently disagree with in this entire long negotiation system is that at the end, it claims that since you can roll all sorts, so it doesn't have a system like Pathfinder 2's, a lot of things where it's time-based, and it's just like, everybody, you get a chance. Now time has passed. Now you don't get a chance again. It just lets you pick whichever character you want every time, and it could be the same one for all of them. And the number of times you attempt it is what makes you run out of time. That's in some ways more similar to 4E, which had an issue where only the best person would attempt. Here they said, since you can roll almost any check you can think of, reason, intuition, knowledge, skills, any other skill creatively applied, that means everyone can participate, not just the person with the highest presence and charm. I would say that the issue with this is that if you have someone who's just better than everybody else at their best skill, then you still want to roll with them every time.
Yeah.
So what I mean is not that they're better at charm, but like they just are better. Like maybe their attribute is the highest attribute in the party by one for some reason. None of these pre-gens have this, or they have an additional boon, which is like an advantage that they're rolling it now and that other people don't have. If there's ever a reason that somebody's bonus is higher, then you would want to roll them every time. And now maybe other parts of the system we haven't seen prevent that from ever happening, in which case you're set. And this isn't even an issue with the negotiation system at all. Because that is a clever way to get around the one person rolls it all system, if so.
Well, my big issue just is that this doesn't really change that much, because like in current gaming systems, you know, like way like in Pathfinder, it's like, okay, if depending on who they're talking to, yes, there's always one person usually in the party that's very good at talking and has the best charisma and diplomacy skills and so forth, but maybe they're talking to someone who is a warrior and a knowledge and a monk, and our character in our class, you know, one of the characters in our game is a monk, and yeah, his diplomacy sucks, but he might get better results, and he does because he's a monk, so they can use different skills. And I'm like, this doesn't really change anything. I mean, yeah, the way you have the skills and working and the roles, but this isn't any different than any other game and that I've seen, to be honest. And more importantly, they seem to go out of their way to make it so everyone can contribute. Everyone can do something. Well, you can do that in D&D and Pathfinder. Everyone could roll a skill check. Anyone could not anyone could disarm, because that's usually just thieves. But in theory, you could have anyone try to disarm a trap. They'll fail, but anyone could do it. You can have your person with a negative, 3 charisma try to negotiate something. They'll probably fail, but nothing stops you from already having everyone try everything in the games, correct? But they seem to be going out of their way to try to find ways that everyone can contribute and add to every experience. Is it a bad
thing to prevent people from being able to get engaged?
No.
To make sure that they at least can do something?
Yeah, but also it can slow down the game.
What would you want?
Well, I like the way we play now. I think of, whenever I play my games, we think of it as the A-team. Who's the face? Who's B.A. Baracus? Who's the crazy guy? We have someone for each role, and they play their roles. And everyone I think people like to have their role. They like to be the face. And then they know that they're the ones who's going to be talking. And they are, that's usually the more outgoing person in general. And I'll be honest, I've played games where I'll have one of my players who's really not comfortable with that, who gets put in that situation, and they don't want to do it. as a player, they don't want to do it. They don't want to be the one negotiating. They just don't feel comfortable with it. So they don't want to play that type of character. So I don't
Well,
think
in MCDM, they don't have to because everybody of the pre-gens has an equally high chance of succeeding. So that person can just sit out. And the person who likes to be doing those face activities, even that player isn't forced to always play the bard in the group, right? Because in Pathfinder 2 or 5e, if you are the person who I want to be the face of the group, I want to talk, and then you have to play the bard. And if you're kind of shy but you love bards, you're kind of in a bind, right? But this system has an advantage, which is that, and Pathfinder 2 does as well because you don't always have to roll diplomacy when you're influencing people.
No, I was going to say our art face guy. He's a sorcerer, and he's the healer.
Sure, a sorcerer or a bard or any charisma
based. You're correct.
You can't play the intelligence character. You're forced to play a character with good charisma in a system where that's how you be the face.
Unless,
and in this system, you don't have to. What if that player loves playing fighters and doesn't want to have doesn't want to have charisma every time?
My point is just that it's fascinating that they're going one way and saying, we are going to make combat super streamlined and make it go really fast because everyone auto hits and all you're doing is figuring out damage. But then they also say in the same breath, but yet we want everyone to always do something and have something to do, which is a beautiful goal and definitely a big issue with TTRPGs. But then that will drag down the gaming because everyone's always doing something.
Not always.
Well,
because some of the things happen automatically. And so that'll speed things up because you don't have to roll as many die rolls.
Perhaps.
You don't have to roll 2 hit and damage. You just roll damage.
We've only seen extremely low level play. And I want to see how this works in mid and high level. And this is, again, this gives you, I will give you full props, man. Because we played our level 16 combat encounter. And it took no more time to do a level 16 Pathfinder 2 combat encounter than our level 5 combat encounter. It really didn't. It doesn't, and I've never seen that. I've never seen that in a game except Pathfinder, that we're literally level 16. They have 3 pages of abilities, and yet it's not taking any longer. Because, first of all, some of those abilities, they just sort of outgrow, and they know they don't really need them. And the game really just it's not any slower at high levels than it is at low levels, and I can't think I could say that about any other TTRPG out there. So I'm very curious that if they're going to be able to really solve it. Yes, they can solve it at the low levels, but I really want to see what these guys look like at 10th level. And actually, does it only go up to 10th? Does it only go up to 10th level? I think it might. The MCDM.
I don't remember them saying exactly, and they're changing things. Like the advancement doesn't exist. The classes only exist in the pre-gens. There's a lot that we don't know yet.
There's a lot we don't know.
Math Guy Dave ran the playtest, and he said the combat is not that fast because it's very tactical. Turns are long, and there's a lot of arguing over who goes in initiative.
There you go. Oh,
now, I was expecting there to be arguing over initiative in a lot of groups. Even the playtest expects that and has an optional variant for not letting the players choose.
That is a big problem. Like, I like initiative. People have issues with initiative systems. Look, of all the games I've played, and I've brought it up before, that not only does tactical combat better than almost any game I've ever seen, and role-playing, how about that, is Oathsworn, which is a board game, but it's really good. And they have a thing in there where anyone can go at any time, and you have basically every time you do something, you have actions, and when you run out of actions, you're done. And when no one has any actions, then the PCs are done, and then the monsters go. So it's like PCs go, and then monsters go, and it just goes back and forth. But because you don't have any order, if you played Pandemic, you're going to know what I'm about to say, is that everyone starts to play each other's turns, which is a real problem when you don't do that. And because you start figuring out, okay, I'm going to go first, and you're going to go, and you're going to go, and you're going to go. And you're like, and I've seen people get into big fights like Dave, don't play my character. I'm going to go when I want to go. Don't tell me when to go. I've seen that fight 100,000 times. And that is the only downside of Oathsworn is that it does have the anyone can go anytime, anywhere, and unless you have players that really get along well, it can turn into each person trying to play each other's turns, which is a
I've
real
definitely
issue.
seen those style of like we can pick who it's going to be.
Mhm.
That either you wind up with a lot of argument or
Yeah.
maybe too much agreement, which is not always one person who's backseating. Sometimes it's that everyone has algorithmically determined what to do,
Right.
and those actually go fast. And it could be a good thing or a bad thing, and it's not always something that is not enjoyed by the group. But like for example, in the Fabula Ultima game I was running, the party had an algorithm almost, which was like if the Guardian has used his block, because in Fabula Ultima it has the exact same initiative as MCDM, where you alternate. One side has one initiative at the beginning, and so they field one person, then the other side, then so on, alternating
Mhm.
until one side runs out, then the other one runs the field with their remainder. So in Fabula Ultima, there are a lot of things that last until your next turn. And one of them that's very important is the Guardian's ability to just jump in front of an attack, often one that would hit the target they're defending, but not them, and either take the damage or negate it. And that comes back at the start of their turn. So the party's algorithm was, has the Guardian used up that ability yet? If so, the Guardian goes right now so that they can use it again the moment that something else comes again. If not, then they have a certain order, and then they have one character who is basically just goes as needed. And then they put that character in if none of their other things have triggered. And that is what they do pretty much every time, unless something very weird happens during the fight. And that's okay because of the fact that they have a very random character that's doing some other things and they have to plan around and think about how they apply that algorithm. But some groups I think wouldn't like that because it's very hive mind among those players.
Yeah, I mean, by the way, I wish Derek was on it because he hated the initiative system for Fabula Ultima so much that they reinvented it and told the author, and then the author agreed with them and put like Derek's initiative system in like an updated version, by the way.
What did Derek change it to?
I don't know. I forgot, but they hated it in one, and it's now been changed because he wrote to the author.
Well, I didn't know that, but
Yeah.
Fabula Ultima is the same one as MCDM, so maybe Derek's hack of Fabula Ultima would work
I
in MCDM as well. Unclear.
Yeah, I'm not. Well, initiative's always tricky because I don't know. I've seen a lot of them, and I like the one. I basically like a version of. You see, this is like if you're a really good group, you're gonna go into initiative and then just reorder anyhow. Like that's what the pros do. It's like just okay, who's going when? The monster's going this. We're going here. Okay, let's reorder, and so we get in the right order. Or better yet, we reorder, especially if you're injured. That you're like, okay, I'm gonna go after the healer, and then the healer heals them up, and then they run in and then take out the bad guy, or they get buffed. It's like, oh, don't go, I'm going to put haste on you, and then everyone delays till the spellcaster goes. And you know what, I like that. I mean, maybe I've just been playing with Pathfinder and 5e initiative for so long that I just am so used to it, and when I see other systems I just can't get over them. But I don't know, overall I think this is a very I like it a fair amount. I do like the monsters a lot. I do like it, which is really funny. As you said, it's really no different than a Pathfinder monster or even a 5e monster. Because they have basic attacks, they have actions, which is like once per encounter, which really for a monster you might as well just say once because per encounter, as in they're going to die and never get to do it again. So it doesn't
Play the
really.
playtest, Steven. There's one example of a character that's in it they could potentially get to use those twice.
Well, there's one I saw though. There's one that does twice per encounter.
No, I don't mean that. I mean there's
Oh,
one who has a per encounter abilities, and there is a setup for you to possibly encounter them twice.
oh, okay. And then there's maneuvers. There's triggered actions. There's villain abilities, which are like special abilities. But again, those are like legendary abilities. I mean, again, this is stuff that's been done in other games. But, they color them, by the way. Looks very 4E, the way they colored them and the way they labeled them. And they even had the little bar going on top. I'm like, that's right from 4E. They have bloodied. which is from 4E. They have minions, which is from 4E. They have artillery controller, soldier, ambusher, skirmisher from 4E. Leader, solo. There's a lot of 4E in this game. And I loved 4E combat. I just wonder if the rest will hold together. And I'm going to be following this playtest very closely. What do you guys think out there? I see there's a lot of people in here. Have you guys played it? Do you have any opinions of what you thought of it? I mean,
I see a ton of people many different people were discussing the pillar of it being cinematic and whether or not they really think that something that's this tactical is going to fully hit cinematic compared to more of a narrative system. Which was an interesting discussion that just kind of went on in the background in chat while we were talking about other things.
You know what? I think a lot of that has to do, but I think that has a lot to do with the players, though, because, sometimes I have players and they love to describe in detail how they do an attack, and I have other players that are just like roll attack damage and that's it, and they just want to get going. It's like, I don't think you can force anyone into doing anything they don't want. Wait, here we have a super chat from Mitros.
We do. It says, from Mirto said that most groups, not all I've played with, have a mix of tactical and non. You have to have it so the non-tactical have fun as well. PF2 does a good job at this, not sure about MCDM.
Yeah.
I think that if you really, really don't want to use tactics, there's still some of these characters that you can play that there's less that you have to worry about in terms of like positioning in squares and counting those out. The healer in particular seems like, other than choosing whether to go for more damaging or more healing effects at the start of each of your rounds, that it would be a little easier for a player who is less into the nitty-gritty tactics to get a hold of. So I would say that there is some dials on that. Whereas I think that the talent, because of the way that it has a stress mechanic that goes between encounters, which none of the other ones in the playtest do, you might want someone who's even more tactical.
I forgot what I was going to say, but someone wanted to know, how do spellcasters work?
So there are two magic-y people that are in there. There's the healer character, the conduit or something like that, is essentially they are magical sourced for their power, but essentially their mechanic is as close to being the same as like the barbarian's mechanic as it could be, while being a little bit different, because the barbarian gets 1d4 of rage or the fury, and the conduit gets 2 of their choice of a combination between, or not their choice, sorry, a random roll that they said that your deity will let you choose to how to affect the roll, of a combination of wrath, virtue points. Virtue, which is used for healing, wrath is used for damaging, and at the start of the fight both of them get an amount equal to victories, and that's where the conduit can pick kind of which balance to take, the sort of all healing, all damaging, or some kind of a mix. The other one, the talent, I've been talking about it multiple times, is a psionic user, but they're essentially a spellcaster. They're completely different from all 4 of the other classes that get some number of points each round that go away at the end of the fight. The talent starts with 0 stress, and they have a stress limit, and every time they cast, it may or may not add stress, and then their limit goes up by 1 per victory, and their stress goes down by 1 per victory, leading to a net result, if you use at least 1 stress every fight, of endurance plus twice the number of victories is the amount you could use if every victory was a fight. I suppose if you have a lot of non-fight victories, then that's fewer, but you also don't need to use as many because you weren't fighting in those other fights or those other encounters.
Yeah, I mean, that was the thing, is magic is really just an ability, and this is where it can fall into the trap of 4E, is that heroic abilities, well, they have one guy who can use psionics, which by the way is awesome, and I saw that, I was like, okay, I love psionics. That's cool. But he has Dagger of the Mind, Slow Zone, and Flay. But then the human has Healing Grace, Terrifying Smite, Punishing Smite. They're exactly the same. Now, you could say, well, that's no different than feats in Pathfinder or 5e. And you would be right. But the thing with feats is that just because there's so many little triggers and nuances that go inside them that they all feel very different. You know, it's like eating food, and like you can take 5 ingredients and still make 10 dishes that all look and taste extremely different because of those 5 ingredients. And that's, I feel, Pathfinder does extremely well. I feel that 4E would take those 5 ingredients and only make 5 things that all kind of look and tasted the same. They may look different, but really they're very similar. And that's my one concern, is that the heroic abilities are very similar between the fighters and the healer. The dwarf actually had they were a little different. They had a little bit more because theirs were more attack based. By the way, we keep seeing this over and over again. What makes it heroic? I think what makes it heroic is, in their mind, that you have to pay attention during combat because you can do reactions and you can actually do things outside of your turn. But you know what? You can do that in Pathfinder already. I mean, our guy who plays a thief, he has lots of reactions, and he's always attacking and doing things based on what other people are doing. Our investigator is always giving bonuses. Like, that already exists. I think they're just really trying to make it that everyone has something to do at all times. But you know what? I don't know if that's such a great thing, too, because I know a lot of people who feel that they're overwhelmed when they constantly have to pay attention. And some people just like to zone out and just, like, play when their turn is up and actually watch from a distance and see what other people are doing. You know, I don't think it's necessarily a guaranteed good thing that everyone has to be engaged at all times, by the way.
I think it's usually good, but you're right.
I think
there's some games that aren't right for every group. If your group is mostly just zoning out when it's not their turn, I think that's a problem in most RPGs, because you're going to have to re-explain the entire situation to them on their turn. It's going to make the fights take forever.
Yeah.
But you especially wouldn't want to run this one for that group, and that's fine. Not every game has to be for every group, but I think that I would hazard to guess that the majority of players like it better if there's something interesting to be paying attention to, and there's some way that they can contribute at any given moment if they want to. They're also not forced to contribute all the time if they want to step back.
And by the way,
I think that's typically a good thing for most.
Some people ask what made. By the way, we missed Mad Bunny art. They said, I backed for the art. TTRPG books have some of the best art around, and MCDM books have some of the best art of them all. I hope the games are good to be happy, even if it's not. Have you seen the Battle Zoo books? I pride myself on having. I was thinking about this. Like, we have, because I'm doing the Eldamon book, I mean, we might have, I think, 150 pieces of art in that book, maybe more.
We have significantly more than that, because we have 162 for the Eldamon alone.
Okay,
so we have several others.
About 180 pieces of art just for that book. That's a lot of art. We have art on almost every single page in our books. I mean, if you want art, check out, just go to battlezoo.com and you'll take any of our books. Our dragon book. I think there's a dragon on every single page of that damn book.
Mad Bunny art says that they've got them all. You don't need to convince them.
Oh, okay. Well, my point is, and I appreciate it. No, but I was thinking about that because, like these TTRPG books, there's so many books where there's just a couple of pieces, and I'm just like, I think we're going crazy because it's on my head because I'm doing the layout for Eldamon right now, and I'm like, oh my god, there's so much, there's so much art. I was like, I don't even know if I'm gonna get to fit it all. I kind of went a little crazy. I'm the only one who orders more art than there are pages in our books.
Well, the Elder entries, they'll at least exist somewhere, but it would be nice if they were also in the book.
Well, it is funny.
Yep. Rich Madrid said, thanks, Mark. Good stuff, as a response to the fact that he had been asking in chat what we were talking about in terms of the way that D&D 4E does out-of-combat things. And the way I explained it is, it's not that it's bad necessarily. It's that it is a mismatch of expectations for my players and those of many other groups, because it's very pulled back in many other D&D editions and D&D like games such as Pathfinder, you roll skills beat by beat.
Correct.
And what I mean by beat by beat is, if you think of things as a movie or a TV show, when you're trying to do this particular thing, it's like, okay, I walk up to that and I roll I'm going to roll this to open this one door or to talk to this one person, and you beat by beat roll the checks. In 4E, especially if you were doing anything with a bunch of skills together, the system heavily encourages you to use skill challenges and in other ways to kind of do a scene that was all one skill check, where it was like, okay, so we need to like infiltrate into this vault as part of this thing we're doing, this complex skill challenge. And so the druid rolls nature to make a lot of plants that like break in through the wall, and then that's how we got in. But you would think it was thievery, but we showed that nature could be rolled as well. And the thing about that is that it's pulled back more, and there are other systems that do that and do it well. And honestly, 4E did it. There were some math things with the way that the balance of the skill challenges worked that they fixed later on, but did it relatively well what it was trying to do. But it's not what most people were expecting for Out of Combat, because they expected more beat by beat and less scene by scene when they're doing a big Out of Combat set piece. And so I think that is where you got the jar in that edition. So that was what I answered him.
We have a question. What's the complexity level of Battle Zoo books? Same as Pathfinder 2nd edition or more?
I would say that Battle Zoo books, that the Battle Zoo Adventure Path has a lot of handrails to help you as the GM to get started. And like the first book of that one is actually pretty easy to run and does not have the kind of complex subsystems that some adventure paths like Kingmaker, actually a lot of them have. There is a pretty different and unique thing near the end of Jewel of the Indigo Isles, but it's well explained.
It ramps up at a nice pace.
It's well explained, I feel, and it does not throw you into the deep end in the way that some others do. However, I would say that that some of the things in Battle Zoo products are willing to go more complex, but they tend to have options that are also simpler so that you can choose your complexity. So, for example, Eldamon, some of those elements will let you do things where you like plant different plants on the battlefield, and there's cacti over here and there's like pine needles over here. And then you can harvest them on later abilities with the wood element to get special benefits. But we know that's one of the complex elements. We also have fire, where you can just burn things. And once you know what powers you have for your character, and we've had people test this out, there's just a few choices, and it's almost like you're holding on to a few cards in your hand of different abilities, and you play them in order and then pick them back up. And so it's actually easier than dealing with a spellcaster in that way. So we try to let you pick your complexity, and we're planning on putting in tables, or actually like visual charts, so you can figure out which ones are less complex so that you're ready to go.
Yeah, for
we
Eldamon,
know kids like to play with things like Eldamon or Avatar, the Last Airbender style, all about the avatars.
For the Eldamon, we're going to actually have a chart, and we're going to show how complex each of the elements are. And when it comes to some of our things like Year of Monsters or Year of Legends, I wouldn't say they're more complex than your standard ancestries. Let's just say they're bigger, longer, more detailed, and deeper.
Some of them were very complex.
But I was going to say some of them, because we're really stretching the boundary here, are pretty complex.
I would say that the intelligent weapon has some complexity because you're literally also a weapon.
Yes.
Whereas dungeons, even though you're literally a dungeon, I feel that I put it out in a way that is easy for anybody, even a brand new player, to play a dungeon.
Yeah, and also we are introducing new concepts in some of our books. So it might seem complex just because you've never played like that before, but really it's not that bad.
So we have Mad Bunny Art gave another super chat that said, last year I tried to commission some art from one of the RFC artists, but he was too busy with RFC work. Sounds like he's not getting a break anytime soon.
Oh, no. Our artists are, in fact, when they go on vacation, I'm upset because then I can't give them as much work. But yeah, they're pretty busy. And it never stops. I'm always having something to work on, And actually, right now is kind of a quiet time, believe it or not, which is so I only have 4 artists working full time.
There you go.
Well, quiet time is
Quiet
four
time for
artists.
art because we're ramping up on other things.
Well, yes, and also, I started the Year of Legends ahead of time, so
Yes,
that's more than half done. All the art for that.
that's
Uh,
good news.
Dragons is pretty much done. Most of the art is
It's
done
getting
for that.
there.
It's
That's
pretty close to
awesome.
done, and we have a few more books coming out. You know what we need to do, Mark? I think we need to do a stream of what we're coming out with in 2024, which we probably should do pretty quick. And
Yeah, we can do that. I'll put that on my list of short video topics because it
yeah,
obviously does not need to be a live
no,
stream.
no, or a quick live stream where we could just go through what to expect from us for 2024. But for those of you right now, the things you need to know about if you're interested in supporting us is Battles of Year of Legends is going on right now, and you can get that at Battlezoo. And every month we're coming out with a new race slash ancestry, and you get angels right away. And next month is Evil Eye, which is really good. I liked it. Mark wrote
It's
Evil
one of
Eye.
Steven's favorites.
I like it a lot. It's really fun. It's silly. Well, because it's just such a it's so alien. It's like it's just like it's an alien type of ancestry because they're almost like octopi, or there's no such thing as octopi, octopuses that they just are born and they're smart and they just know what to do and they just go and do their own thing. Like there's the they don't really have parents or anything, and sometimes, but they just sort of exist and they're super intelligent and they're in their own little world. And that's when I read them, Mark. I thought of octopuses when I read that, by the way.
Uh-huh.
And they kind of
That
look like them
explains it.
too. Yeah. Well, because that's what octopuses. They're super smart and they just get born and do their own thing. Um, then we also have Year of Monsters hardcover, which you can sign up for here, and there's going to be some very cool stuff there that you won't believe. I've not told anyone about. And then in a few more months we have Secret Dragons, where you will be able to play new dragons if you have the Book of Dragons already, and you'll get to run them as monsters, you get to play them as characters, you'll have new lore, new information, and we have tons of new dragons coming out. I just showed Mark the cover, and how good was that cover, Mark?
It was awesome.
Even I was like, damn, that cover that is some sick cover. It's one of my new guys, and the cover was so good.
It's very, very good.
It's very good. And we're gonna well, the dragons I go all out on because you want to make sure the dragons look as good as possible.
Yeah.
And
Everyone loves the pictures of the dragons. Even non-gamers that we showed it to over the holidays, they were gushing about the art of the dragons at the very least.
everyone loves dragons.
So back to the MCDM. I know we got several super chats about this, so it makes sense that we were talking about it. Yeah, I'm really interested in this. There's a lot of things that I like, and yes, sure, Steven, you're right. In tabletop RPGs, even like Pathfinder 2, the game that I worked on, I can name other tabletop RPGs that did something similar to almost all of our major design choices that we had. But you never have a game that does quite all of them in the same way, and there's nothing exactly like MCDM RPG either. So I would be excited to try it out or to stream it and show it off to people. I think there's some really cool things in here. And obviously, I can tell that it is like a very early play test that they only have certain parts of and that they're going to be changing later on. Just from reading it, it's clear as a game designer, and they've made that very obvious as well. But I think there's a lot of interesting things, and there's a lot of fun points that people would enjoy from playing it. So I'm happy to run the play test if we can get some players.
Yeah, we'll try. I am very curious. But I do always find it a little strange. I mean, I guess he's proven himself that so many people backed an RPG.
But you always say he's proven himself, and you talk about it as he, but it's really like it started with that, but it's a company that has people in it, and people know the names of other people who are in the company.
It's literally called the Matt Colville.
It is literally named after him.
Role-playing game. His name is literally the name of the game.
But they have another person who's the lead designer.
I know, but his name is in the game.
James Introcaso. And there's a lot of other people who are working on it too. So they have a proven track record for producing the kind of quality that the people who are backing it expect. And sure, maybe someday down the line, there'll be things that don't live up to that, but they have a track record of that it does. So why would people not trust that the future products will be like the previous products? It's like people know Battle Zoo is going to be awesome from the previous books, and some people back it right away because of that reason.
Fair enough.
And they've had so many more years of Matt giving all those GM tips and building a relationship with the base and a relationship that they have not like used in a bad way, right? A relationship they've shown themselves to be good actors. So why would they not have that level of faith from people?
No, I know, but it's just I don't know, $130 for 2 books. That was I hope it's good. I really truly hope that they can pull this. I mean, I'm very impressed and I like what I see so far. How about that? I backed it before I even read this and knew anything about it. And I like it. Because I loved 4E. I loved the combat. And I like, I've said it a million times. We love combat in Pathfinder. It's our favorite part of the game. And I find it very fun. It's really interesting. And a game that also has good combat, I have no problem with that. By the way, we're going to end the stream soon. They were fighting those what are they, the muckrats or whatever those are, those 3-headed centipedes that spit fire.
The
Mukrati. So Mukrati, they were fighting 2 Mukrati.
Weren't they fighting 3 the last time you told the story?
It was 2 Mukrati. Okay. They're level 16. Mukrati are level 15, but they are really closer level 17 because they are insanely hard, and they
definitely are not closer to level 17.
Okay,
but they are very powerful, and they have certain effects that can really beat you up.
Dude,
but
they can tear you in half and kill you instantly.
Their offensive potential, if they're in the right circumstances, can be very high, but their defenses are so far below a 17 that I don't think that they can compare to any 17.
Fair enough. You're right. Their defenses are a little low, but their offense is so outrageously strong. First they have a 20-foot reach, and they recharge their breaths constantly, and they can kill you instantly. And, which is very easy to do, by the way, they can hit you, but this way, every time they went, they were doing about 150 points of damage on one character. And if they used their breath weapon, it could have been 200-300. I mean, they were doing amazing amounts of damage.
Yeah, though they are nasty customers.
But here's the thing. In the beginning of the combat, they started the combat, and the monk just in one round went from 250 hit points down to 90. And they were like, what do we do? What do we do? And they were talking about it for probably 20 minutes. And then they're like, well, and they like, should we run away? Should we come back? How are they going to heal? What are we going to do? Blah, blah, blah. And they're in a prison, in an interdimensional prison. So they ain't going anywhere. And they're going to be fighting these things one way or another. So like, John Statz, God bless him. He is the most chaotic player on planet Earth. This guy is the definition of chaos. And he's like, screw it, let's just see what happens. He rolls and he crits. And I'm like, oh my God. And okay, what a way to start off the new year.
That's both good and bad.
Wait,
crit and Mukrati,
I know. Well, I'm not done. And then he made it flat-footed. Now, they can't normally get flat-footed because they have all-around sight, but his special ability allowed him to get flat-footed. He rolls again, he crits. And I was like, oh my God. So in 2 hits, he does something like 150 points of damage. He rolls again, he crits. And I was like, are you kidding me?
That's like 3/4 of its health.
3 crits in a row. Oh, he killed it. And then they're like, well, I guess I guess we're not running away. I was like, that was a 20-minute conversation. That was totally wasted. No, actually, he didn't kill it. This is what he did. He did the deliberating strike
Oh, debilitating strike. Yeah.
strike, and he did slow 3 on it, so it didn't even get to go. It's like, okay, even when it gets to go, it uses its whole turn just to get rid of the slow 3, and then it was killed. The very next player just killed it because he had down to like 10 hit points, and then they're like,
don't you love those moments? So you can tell that story,
yeah, I know,
over and over again.
Yeah, but that's the best part. That's why I like having the 2 hit, because it goes to like, look, I know it sucks when you miss, but 3 crits in a row? Come on. I mean...
So it sounds like you like it when it can be very swingy.
I like it swingy.
I got news for you.
I love
MCDM
RPG,
there's a 1 in 12 chance that you get essentially another main turn.
I saw that.
Whenever you act, and if you can act off turn, there's a 1 in 12 chance that you get to go again.
Yeah.
And so that is a big deal. It's basically if you roll boxcars or an 11 on 2d6, you get to go again.
Yeah.
Now, there's a limit of once per turn, but not once per round of getting to go again. And that means that you could theoretically get to take 4 times if you went and you critted on your turn and went again, and then you have an ally who's a tactician who in that game, one of their core things they can do is give you your attack if they want to. Yeah. And then you crit that one, then you also get to go again. So you could go 4 times in MCDM. So I think that'll be a story, and it's only a 1 in 144 chance to do that. So that'll be a story if that ever happens. It's like your John Stott story where you're like, I don't know what was going to happen, but then this guy, the Fury, went 4 times after the tactician and just wrecked it.
That's cinematic. And talk about like, it's not like, oh, this was a fight against some troll. Like, this is a fight against one of the toughest creatures in the game, and 2 of them. And they're like, oh my God, what are we going to do? What are we going to do? Like, literally 20 minutes of them discussing what they're going to do. And I let them, I know it's not realistic, but I don't care. Like, and they just said, and then John's just like, screw it. And he just attacks, and everything changed. Like, but that's the old saying. It's like, what is it? All the tactics go out the window once you get on the battlefield. Like, that's the same exact thing. It's like they could talk all they wanted, but as soon as they critted 3 times and killed that first one, suddenly the battle became very different. And they had no problem taking down the last one. But the healer was all the way in the back. The healer was literally 40, 50 feet in the back, and he was still getting hit by trample and breath weapons, because the 60-foot breath weapon. He was almost dead.
I know you like it when there's some red meat for the GM as well. So I'll tell you a similar thing for MCDM for the GM. So, Steven.
Yes.
The monsters, if they are a big boss monster, could have as many as 2 turns, each of which get 2 attacks.
I saw that.
For a total of 4 attacks.
Yeah.
But now think about this. Each of those 2 turns can generate an extra hit if you get a crit. And since you're making 2 attacks on it, and your maneuver might have a 2d6 or something like that, you have more chances to get a critical with the 2 attacks. Your chances of generating at least 1 hit start getting pretty good when you're rolling 4 times. And so you'll be often able to tell the story maybe of, I got 4 attacks and I got 2 extra, 1 for each of the turns, for a total of 6 attacks on those PCs.
Yeah.
Take that.
Well, solos should do that.
Yeah, I know. And I know you like that kind of thing. So I thought that's something that MCDM does that you would enjoy, is those swingy turns. When, remember, if they did get those 6 attacks, that also means 2 of their attacks did really high damage as well. Because they rolled almost maximum damage. But that's the other thing about it, is that the damage was high and they get an extra turn. So it really piles on.
I mean, you have to really know your group, though, because like our guys love that. But I know a lot of people who would, if they got attacked 3, 4, 5, 6 times, they would stop playing. They'd rage quit. They would not like that. I know that is not everyone's cup of tea. That is for us.
Well, they do get to go again after, at worst, 3 of those 6 attacks.
I know, but still, it's brutal. It's brutal when that happens.
You've got to bring a conduit. They actually have the ability to let someone multi-heal if they got their virtue points. They can just spend a number of virtue points, and that person, their target can heal a number of 1/3 of their maximum hit points equal to the virtue points as a freebie.
That's something that's interesting, is that there was you just heal 1/3. There's no roll.
Yes.
Which I thought was also very interesting.
And since the conduit can do it literally without taking any of their own actions to do that, just if their turn happens, they can just be like, hey, you heal you can heal 2/3 of your maximum. So that can be a good way to stopgap if the boss got 3 turns and is about to, or got 2 turns with a crit for a third and is about to go again.
I don't play with people who would quit that if that would happen. I have played with people who would quit, and I've seen others. And I used to play a lot. I used to GM a lot of Society, and in Society, you never know who you're going to get. And I've gotten some good players, and I've gotten some bad players. I'll leave it at that. And I've gotten some very bad players, unfortunately. But whatever. Anyhow, with that, we've gone well over 2 hours.
We sure have.
And it's good. It's good. If you want to see it, you can become a Patreon for MCDM. I think it's like $8 a month, and you can then download the first playtest. And I'm sure
I'd say that the playtest is definitely worth your $8 if you want to consider whether you're going to be putting in the more money to get the whole game. It'll give you a very good sense. Also, Stephen, is this another one on our list of, oh yeah, of course we'll run that, or are you actually planning on having us do it?
You know what it is? I do want to run it, but the big issue is I'm so tired at night.
Yeah,
I don't even like to run
tricky.
my own games. It's like even my own games, I'm too tired to run.
Well, if I run it, that will help.
Yeah, but then we'd have to set it up, and I don't know. Let me see.
That is the issue. They definitely want it to be done on a grid, which means that we'd have to set up a simple grid for everybody.
I think Derek already has it set up, so maybe we have Derek run it.
If Derek will give us his foundry or whatever,
he does have it.
Of the grid,
that
could definitely work.
There's so many things I want to run, but we got another super chat.
Omega Rogue LP said the old saying, "Everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked."
Mm-hmm.
That's true.
That is true. Here we go. Used to be Adventure Like You, but then everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
Even my 4-year-old nephew knows that everything changed when the Fire Nation attacked.
But run it on DDB maps. Yeah, I don't have DDB maps, by the way. I thought that was I had my own video yesterday where I looked at the D&D website. I'm gonna have to do another video on that. That website is so broken, and there's like literally links that go nowhere. And just like you click on news, click on all news, it's broken. I'm like, what is going on with this company? I'm like, your website doesn't even work. That's inexcusable. That's beyond inexcusable. Anyhow, I mean, everyone has issues, but they're $1 billion company, and this is their launch product. You might want to get your act together, Watsy. That's a whole other topic. But do be on the lookout for Eldamon. Try to release both tomorrow. Worst comes to worst, Friday. But I'm going to try to release both the pre-release for Pathfinder tomorrow, and then the pre-release for 5e. I know your 5e people have been begging to see Eldamon for 5e. Well, finally you will. That's true.
And we've got it, and it's ready. All we need is to apply a little bit more proofreading on the layout, because sometimes we get copy pasta that sneaks in. Nobody wants pasta with their Eldamon unless there was a flying spaghetti Eldamon, which there isn't.
I love pasta. It's my favorite thing in the world, by the way.
Okay. Well, then maybe we need a pasta Eldamon next.
I would not say no to that.
Okay. Well, we'll think about it. We do have Podfox who loves cooking and maybe would make pasta in that cauldron. They are little noodly foxes, so maybe they are like a pasta in a certain way.
I wanted to purchase multiple copies of the book from you to give away. So yes, Jimmy, you can contact me on Discord's probably the easiest way, because I'm easy to get in touch with on Discord. Just join our Discord and just write Roll for Combat. That's me. You could send us an email, help@rollforcombat.com. I'm pretty easy to find. I'm one of the easiest people to find on the on the web. Those
You're
are the two
also
easiest
Steven at
ways.
rollforcombat.com,
Steven
right?
at Roll for Combat, help at Roll for Combat, pretty much anything at Roll for Combat. Mark doesn't even have a Roll for Combat account.
I
That's
don't.
that's
I'm
how
not
little he
even.
uses email.
I could if you gave me one.
You don't
I
need
just
it.
I always send people to my LLC's email address instead.
Yeah, but
because
you don't even use it. You don't use your email. Everyone just
I mean,
contacts you through Discord.
I use it, but I don't use it a lot.
Fair enough. So, all right.
All right. So take care, everyone, and I hope
Okay.
you enjoyed our look into MCDM RPG. I saw some people in chat who said that they really liked some of the breakdown that I gave and said that it was that they felt that it was more accurate than some of the other ones that they've seen. I don't know. I'm glad I mean, being a professional game designer, it allows me to look at things in a way and try to describe them better. So thanks for that compliment to the folks in chat. And until next time, if you want to battle the zoo, you have to roll for combat.
Bye, everyone.